Yeah, I'm going to take off where the chairman just left off. The communist Chinese government bans Twitter, yet companies based in China advertise on the platform. When a user clicks on such an advertisement, they've presumably redirected to a website controlled by the Chinese government, which can collect vast amounts of data and track their location. With respect to pro-democracy Chinese citizens, is Twitter endangering their lives by allowing China to advertise on the platform?
I think that's a very valid concern, sir. And that was a concern that was raised to me by the employees inside Twitter who were disturbed that in a country where the service was not allowed to be used and provide a voice to the public, but that money was being accepted from organizations that may or may not be associated with the Chinese government. And I believe there was a Reuters article just a day or so ago saying that they did identify that there were governments related to China advertising on the platform, possibly in violation of Twitter's own policies. The executive in charge of sales very shortly after I joined said, Mudge, this is a big internal conundrum because we're making too much money from these sales. We're not going to stop. We need something that will make the employees more comfortable with the fact that we're doing this, figure out how we essentially thread this needle or frame it, which made me a bit uncomfortable. And they didn't know what people they were putting at risk or what information they were even giving to the government, which made me concerned that they hadn't thought through the problem in the first place that they were putting their users at risk for. And that was a very common problem where I saw that Twitter was a company that was managed by risk and by crises instead of one that manages risk and crises. It was very it would react to problems too late.
I think you just answered this question, but I want to ask it and see if you've said all you want to on the subject. While at Twitter, you raised concerns with their policy allowing Chinese advertisement. What was Twitter's response?
In a nutshell, it was, we're already in bed. It would be problematic if we lost that revenue stream. So figure out a way to make people comfortable with it.
Okay. According to your disclosure, thousands of Twitter employees have access to Twitter user data and internal systems. That includes nearly 4,000 engineers, which is half of Twitter's workforce. However, you've stated that they don't need that kind of widespread access to perform their job duties. Based on Twitter's reported lack of data security, what kind of access would foreign agents have, and what kind of data would they be able to obtain? In your answer, please explain why this is a problem and how it could impact U.S. national security.
Yes, sir. Let me break that down into two parts of an answer. So Twitter has engineers and non-engineers. Twitter does not have, at least when I was there, which was up until January of 2022, does not have a testing environment or a development or staging environment. This is an oddity. This is an exception to the norm. Most companies will have a place where you test your software, where you build it, where you make sure it's working the way you want it to. Think about somebody building an airplane and saying, like, I'm going to put it in a wind tunnel. I'm going to build it in an environment. I'm not going to put passengers on it, put it in the air, and then figure out how to build it or tweak the engines at that point. Twitter just has the production environment, the running systems, the live data. When you become an engineer, which is half of the company are engineers, you are by default given some access to this live production environment. You are doing your testing, you are doing your work on live systems and live data, irrespective of where you are in the world as an engineer. So if you are a foreign agent and you are hired and you are an engineer, you've got access to all of that data that we talked about. The 80% that Twitter doesn't know what's in, yet the engineers studied and realized is personally identifying information, other sensitive information, where there's a lack of access controls because they have too much data and they just didn't know where everything is, so they have to give everybody access, and the systems can access the information. But also recall that foreign agents can have multiple goals. And sometimes it's not just the engineers or the technical access that they want, but it might be information about the plans of Twitter, what plans Twitter has to potentially censor information in a government or concede to a government's request, or what plans they have for expansion in a particular environment. And in those cases, that's where I saw, with high confidence, a foreign agent placed from India to understand the negotiations and how well they were going for or against India's party, who was having difficulties with Twitter in India.
In your disclosure, you mentioned that the FBI notified Twitter that one of their employees was suspected of being a Chinese foreign asset. Were you and others at Twitter at all surprised by that?
This was made aware to me maybe a week before I was surprised and summarily dismissed. I had been told, because the corporate security, physical security team had been contacted and told that there was at least one agent of the MSS, which is one of China's intelligence services, on the payroll inside Twitter. While it was disturbing to hear, I and many others had recognizing the state of the environment at Twitter, we're really thinking, if you are not placing foreign agents inside Twitter, because it's very difficult to detect them, it is very valuable to a foreign agent to be inside there. As a foreign intelligence company, you're most likely not doing your job.